G'day guys, my name is Christopher and welcome back to aartadventure. Today I'm going to be making a hydrangea flower greeting card with a thank you sentiment, and so if that interests you, take a moment to click subscribe or the notification bell or both down below, and let's get on with the show. Okay, so I start off this greeting card by using some Strathmore watercolor paper, and if you don't have that greeting card paper, just take some regular watercolor paper or paper of any kind that you're going to be using, like mixed media paper, and fold it in half or to the size of an envelope. And then I draw a rough circle that's slightly off the card with a couple of ovals underneath. To draw the petals of the hydrangea are a lot easier than you might think. Although it looks really complicated, all you need to do is really draw some rough oval shapes that connect into the center, 4 of them meeting at a little circle point. And if that's too fast for you from the demonstration that you see on screen, you can go into your YouTube settings and click 1/4 speed, and that should be close to how fast I was drawing. I think I sped this up 5 times more than the actual time I took. It's also a good idea to draw the center flowers a little bit larger than the ones on the edge, and to use a reference so that you can angle some of the petals a little bit more than others to get a little bit of roughness and interest to the outside of the flower, but it's up to you. In terms of the leaves, just add some little serrations on the edges instead of leaving them as an oval. Draw a line down the center for a vein, and then some branching off veins from that center line. And then it's on to the sentiment itself. You could use a dip pen or a calligraphy pen or a brush pen or whatever you want to use, but I've found sometimes it's easier for me or less stress for me if I just draw out the sentiment or the words in pencil and then go over the lines that I've created with whatever medium that I'm going to be using. In this case, I'll be using some Zig Real Clean brush pens for those words and some of the hydrangea flower, but of course you can use whatever you like. I just felt like using a range of supplies that I don't use that often, or actually I don't actually like that much. So I'm using Nigi watercolors for the background, and then for the thank you sentiment, Zig Real Clean brush pens, and for some of the flower I'm using that as well for the first layers. And then the final layers I'm going to go in with my Marabu Graphix Aqua Pens. So you can see me putting in the background here now with my pearlescent Nigi watercolor paints. These are good for a background because you can't really get much depth or high contrast to those colors, or at least for most of them anyway. So you're just going to get a soft wash, and that's the kind of thing that I wanted for this background. Something to imply other hydrangea flowers or vegetation behind this flower. And then I go in with my Zig Clean Color real brush pens. I picked these up in Japan, but I know you can get them overseas now as well. And they're watercolor brush pens with a real brush on the end if you're not used to them or you haven't seen them before. And of course, if you don't have them, just use regular watercolors or markers or whatever you have. I lay in various blues and pinks and purples for the hydrangea petals, alternating where I'm putting them so that there'll be a bit of interest throughout the hydrangea, but making sure that all parts of the flowers have some parts with blue, some parts with pink, some parts with purple. I'll go in later to put in detail. I really just want soft mixings of colors at the moment, and you can do this however you like, but I'm doing it quite loose and wet, and so I'm going to get a soft, more impressionistic sort of flower there. And same sort of thing for the leaves. I'm going in with various greens and some blues and darkening in where I see the veins and underneath where the flower would be. I probably should have done that a little bit more to give some more shadow right underneath the flower where the flower meets the leaves, but live and learn. I think it ends up okay in the end. It's also important when you're using these brushes not to lay down too much water if you're going to wet an area first, because the water will suck up into the brush and then you won't be able to use it for a while, or you can even, I think, ruin the pen if it's too much water. So you have to practice a little bit to get to know how wet or damp the paper should be. At most, just slightly damp. And alternatively, place down some color and then wet it immediately if you want to fan that color out. Or you can also use a plastic palette or some sort of plastic and scribble onto that and then pick up color as you go. For the words, I want stronger color. I go in with a light pinkish purple for all of the word. And then on the top parts, I add in some dark blue. And then I just, for each letter as I go, add a little bit of water to blur that blue into the purple. You can also see that I'm working right to left. That's simply because I'm left-handed, and so it's easier for me not to smudge if I go right to left across the page. I probably should have started with the thank you first, but I think I avoided that because the K has a big swirl on it, and I wanted to get my hand a little bit warmed up before I went straight into a kind of complicated fine line swirl. In terms of the swirls and motions for these, I find that the real brush on the tip can be very fine pointed and work really well, and you can really use them just as a calligraphy pen. And so that's one of the reasons why crafters love these pens. They're really versatile. You can use them from really wonderful detailed watercolor pieces of fine art to calligraphy to crafts like making a card here. So they're really versatile and fun to work with. I should probably use them a little bit more. And so you can just see me here adding in the water to blur in the blue to the pinkish purple, and I just keep doing that. I was considering at the start to add an outline or a shadow line after I finished the words, but once I finished, I actually quite liked the look of how it was just as it was, so I decided to leave it. But of course, you could use a fine liner, or you could go in with a third color and add in shadow colors like a gray or a deeper purple or a softer purple, whatever you wanted to do, or you could outline it completely. It's up to you. But I decided it was good as it was, and I just wanted to leave it. Partly because I hadn't made a thank you card or a greeting card for some time, and I guess I was a little bit nervous to possibly ruin it. Of course, if you are really nervous, you can just trace what letters you want and then use a marker pen instead of a brush pen. Or if you're really not confident at all, you could, of course, buy a stamp and have a sentiment that you just simply stamp onto your card. I once bought a few stamps, and then I realized that I just wanted to make something different after I'd used them, and then I would just be collecting more and more and more stamps, and then have the issue of all these stamps and then trying to figure out where to store them when I could just learn how to draw this stuff. And so it's much cheaper and I think much easier in the long run for me to just start learning how to draw the things that I want to draw and draw those things onto my card directly, or trace them if they're a little bit more complicated. And if they're somewhere in between, you can use a grid method or all sorts of other, things like transfer paper. And I recently did a video showing how to use transfer paper, so I will link that up there. I think it's that way, one of these corners, and you can go check that out if you like. So now I get to move back to the flower now that it's dried on that first layer, and now I'm switched to my Marabu Graphix Aqua Pens. I actually don't recommend or like these pens very much at all. I just received them in art subscription boxes and I want to actually use the supplies that I have. So I'm using the bullet nib and some of the brush nib. I'm doing the outline of the petal with the bullet nib and then switching to the brush for some of the darker values. It's a good idea to add contrast and depth to the flowers by adding in shadow areas below some of the petals, and I'm doing that with deep purples and some darker blues, and then while it's still fresh, adding in some water. One of the problems with these pens though is that some of the colors dissolve better than others, or some of the pens activate with water better than the others, and you can't really tell which are going to work well and which aren't. So it makes it a little bit tricky. But in the end, I'm pretty happy with the card that I produced, and I hope that you've enjoyed watching it here too, and maybe given you the idea or encouraged you to make your own greeting card or thank you card. Thank you so much as always for watching, and remember to create more and consume less, and I'll see you guys soon for another art adventure. Take care.
you.